Sex Party with your host, Dustin Ribka.
Hello and welcome to Sex Party. I am your host, Dustin Ribka. Do you eat breakfast or are you one of those people who skip it? I never eat breakfast. On the show this week is Alana Dunn. She is one of the best to do it. She is the host of the Seeing Other People podcast. She also spent 2 years of her life working for Hinge. We talk about communication. We talk about how things can get confusing. We talk a little bit about the pandemic, what that's done to dating. But, you know, this episode is really strong in the sense that it really, keys in on the idea that lack of communication, poor communication, not speaking up really sort of can ruin fucking everything, kind of like COVID. So strap in, put your thinking caps on, pour yourself a drink. This is my conversation with Alana Dunn.
This week's conversation.
Alana Dunn, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited to be here. How are you?
I am I'm cold right now, but I'm warming up. So yeah, other than that, I had a pretty decent day today, which is great. Thank you for asking. No one ever asks, and that's wonderful.
Well, usually when I ask, people are like, "Oh, I'm fine." I'm like, "How are you really?"
Yeah, I feel like you're always gonna get a truthful answer from me, whether you want it or not. So
Yeah, usually I'm not told that you're cold. So
yeah, I have no idea. I just it must be my heart or something. I'm just constantly cold. Okay, so I'm super glad you're here. Tell us about yourself and who you are, and your hopes, dreams, and nightmares.
all of it. My name is Alana, as you guys already know. I'm 27. I live in New York City. I host the Seeing Other People podcast, talk all about dating and relationships, really with the goal of helping people feel less alone in their dating lives. My hopes in life right now are that I can keep growing, seeing other people, keep getting it to reach more people so it can help more people. Also so that it can help me not have to do a million freelance things on the side, and really just have seeing other people be what I do for a living. My fears in life, right now I have a little puppy and my fear is that he's taking over my life, but it's also a great thing. And that's it. That's me.
Okay, so tell me about your podcast, Seeing Other People.
Yeah. So seeing other people actually was an idea that started when I was working at Hinge. And I started a podcast for Hinge called Dating Sucks, which each week I had a co-host, and each week we would bring on a different expert in their field, whether it was somebody who was an actual expert, like a therapist or a psychiatrist or behavioral scientist, or somebody who was an expert in specifically what they did. Like we wanted to talk about how like first dates and going to a bar or a restaurant and first date etiquette. So we actually brought in a bar owner and a bartender because they are experts in that. And so I kind of continued the same concept with Seeing Other People, where on Tuesdays I have episodes where I do bring in experts like those to actually talk about a specific challenge that many of us face in modern dating and how we can learn to overcome that or be a little better or change our behaviors to kind of set ourselves up for more success. And then on Thursdays, I have listeners come on anonymously to talk about what they've really struggled with in dating, in relationships, in love, and how they overcame it and what they learned from it. So for example, I've had someone come on to talk about getting a herpes diagnosis and how that did and didn't impact her life and what she ended up deciding to do, and how she communicated that to the person who she got it from and how she communicated it to people she was seeing after that point. I had somebody come on to talk about having to get an abortion and what that was like for her. And I've had somebody come on to talk about having to date after losing a parent or losing a brother, things like that. So it's really like there's no topic that isn't covered in these unfiltered episodes, and they've really become the heart of seeing other people. So I'm just really appreciative that the listeners are willing to come on and be open like that.
Yeah, it's a really fun show, but it's not afraid to get its hands dirty. With my show, I feel like we're either everyone's having a good time or everyone's just like covered in blood, and so with your show, it's very it's fun, but you're learning. You might be learning on my show, but we get like really dirty fast. I mean, so far I'm a new show, so we're still figuring out the kinks. But hey,
Look, I'm figuring out the kinks every day. There's a new kink every day. Don't you worry, it never goes away.
Super happy to hear that. So between the podcast and then your time with Hinge, what would you say are the most like common problems with dating, issues with dating? I mean, are there like one or two or 17 things that sort of like stick out that you keep coming back to these same ideas?
There are a lot of ways I could answer this, but what I'm going to say is that every single problem that I have heard, that I have seen, that I have even reflected on in my own life could have been solved with better communication. Like every single situation that we end up getting ourselves into is either the result of poor communication or a lack of communication or miscommunicating. And that can go into us making assumptions about somebody even before a date or after like one date based on how they're texting, or obviously like ghosting has been the biggest thing ever and people are still ghosting no matter how much they know that they shouldn't. And that's because like they don't know how to communicate in a proper way that they're not feeling something, or even just like leading people on. And a lot of people end up getting into situations where they think it's going somewhere and then the other person's like, oh no, like I'm not looking for something serious. And it's like, well, you could have communicated that way earlier on. And so it does seem like more often than not, the root of every dating struggle is some form of communication problem.
Yeah, and that is an issue that I'm finding out on this show. It just comes up over and over and over again. I've in my personal life, I've always been a big proponent of just being really straightforward. It's been a lot rougher than people would imagine to tell the truth all the time, but it was a choice that I sort of made to practice doing, and it just sort of after a couple of years, it sort of just became part of my personality. And so now I feel like I sort of get in trouble here and there because I tell the truth quite a bit. It's never like anything mean or anything like that. It's just the truth. And I feel as though the communication issue is big because there's so many reasons why someone isn't telling you what's really happening. So maybe we could talk about that a little bit. What do you think as far as communication goes? Is it a pride thing? Is it a fear thing? Is it they're a psychopath maybe? Or
yeah, no, it's a really good question. I'm glad you brought that up. And I think so here's kind of what I've been thinking about lately. You know, the like really popular phrase, if he wanted to, he would.
Of course.
So everybody's like, well, if he wanted to, he would. Like, I'm not hearing from him, so he doesn't want to see me, or like he hasn't made a plan, so or he hasn't told me how like that he wants to be in a relationship, so he doesn't, because if he wanted to, he would. And I kind of have been hearing that, and it's been frustrating me because, and this could go with he, she, any person. If you wanted to, like, think about how many times you wanted to but didn't for one reason or another. Maybe you didn't know how. So maybe you've never communicated that you are falling in love with someone, or that you really like you don't know how to say, I've enjoyed spending my time with you, but I think this is as far as it's going to go. Like, I don't see a future. You don't know how to say that. Or the last time you were brutally honest with somebody about your feelings, it didn't go well, so you're afraid to. The last time you told somebody that you really were excited to see where this goes with them, or you saw a future with them, they said, oh, well, I don't feel the same, so you're afraid to. Or maybe you're still getting over something and you're trying to make it work, but you're not sure yet how you feel, so you haven't communicated anything because you're trying to figure it out. There are so many different situations because we all date based on our experiences and based on what has happened to us in our previous relationships, previous dating situations. And so there's just this like misalignment where sometimes somebody doesn't know how to communicate, or they're not ready to communicate, or they're afraid to communicate something. And so the other person just writes them off and assumes XYZ thing about them based on XYZ thing that they've been through. And so that's where it's kind of a really shitty situation all around, because somebody's thinking one thing and the other person might be thinking something completely different. And that can't be resolved without communicating.
Yeah. It seems so fucking basic, right? It seems like it should be something that's just understood. Like, I would like French fries. I'm going to order French fries. But the second it becomes about something personal and internal, it just goes out the fucking window. And it's this weird game that people play with themselves, really. And then they take that game to other people's courts, if you will, and just fuck up everything. 100%. I think communication is like the crux of every problem.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious to hear what your experiences have been, because on the flip side of the lack of communication problem, it's also a thing where when somebody does communicate, because we're so used to not hearing somebody tell us what they're thinking or feeling, sometimes we interpret it the wrong way. And that's where you see people being like, oh, they're being way too aggressive, or, oh, they're like way too needy, or like, it was so weird. Like, he told me he likes me after the second date. Like, that's so way OD. Like, and so that's why when you said like, you're kind of just such a straight shooter with your feelings and with communicating, I'm very impressed, but I'm also curious to see how that's gone. Yeah.
Yeah. So with me, I have just always tried to be as direct as possible, but also as descriptive is a bad word, but I just want to, if I have something to say, I want to say it all. And usually when I get involved with someone, I try to be as upfront. I don't really know what I want. I'm one of those, basically, but I'm very open about it. Recently have discovered that because of the show that I'm doing, I had a couple of guests where attachment theory has become a thing. And I'm sure you could guess already, like, what attachment style I am. So whatever, but it's avoidant for those of you in the audience who can't figure it out. Yeah, it's avoidant. And so I recognized that before I knew what avoidant was, I had recognized it a long time ago. And I also realized that there was this wreckage of women around me that I didn't want to hurt. I didn't mean to hurt, and I did hurt. I had told them the truth from the beginning. I don't know what I want. This isn't a serious thing. I really value you as a person. Yeah, I value the sex. Yeah, I value the hanging out, but I'm not in it for a relationship. And in some people's book, that would be enough. That would be, well, you told them the truth and they still whatever. But for me, I started to feel really empathetic for, right or wrong, I started to feel bad for having not one, but a handful of people around me that were kind of like upset. And there was a lot of disappearing and reappearing and people like blocking me and unblocking me and like all of these things that happened. So it's been kind of a mess. And to remedy that, I sort of took myself just before COVID hit, before we ever heard the word COVID, I sort of took myself out of rotation because I thought I'm dangerous. I accidentally, without knowing, I sort of manipulate people, not intentionally, and I'm not ever trying to do something bad. I don't know. I just my personality is one of these things, and I'm learning now as I get older. My personality is one of these things that I don't know. I really like people a lot. And people seem to be drawn to me a lot. And I've always been really grateful for that. And I always get into adventures, whether it's someone on the street asking me like for directions, or it always seems to play out in some adventurous way. Like, how did we get here? Oh, well, Dustin had to answer the person's or whatever. So there's that side of it. Then there's also the side of it with dating or with relationships with the opposite sex. It's always taken me on amazing adventures. So I've always loved it. But just before COVID, I'm like, I need to like take myself out of the equation. I'm dangerous, which may have been an overreaction, but I've been out of rotation for a long, long time. Even when people like hit on me in a bar or in the laundry room or wherever, there's a voice in my head that's like, don't play into it. And so there's two schools of thought. Some people I know are like, that's dumb. You can't just ice yourself over forever. You tell people how you are and that's it. And then the other side's like, good. So the long answer, there you go. There's all the info.
Well, so the first thing that comes to my mind when hearing your story in the last few years of your dating life is, did you find yourself in situations where you were saying, like, I'm not looking for something serious, but like, I'm enjoying this and we can keep it going, but that it wasn't going to actually turn into a relationship? Like, that's kind of what I'm hearing that you were telling people. Mm-hmm. But then were they like staying in it, being like challenged?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Exactly. So that's what I did.
Oh, perfect.
That's what I would do to myself in every single dating situation for years. And yeah, it fucking sucked. It really sucked because the thing is, like, in those situations, you're right. Like, you actually were communicating, hey, I'm not looking for a relationship, but I like hanging out with you and I'll continue hanging out with you, but I'm not looking for a relationship. And all I would hear is, oh, he likes me.
Oh. Yep.
And like, yeah, he might not be looking for a relationship with me yet because like he doesn't know me that well. But once he gets to know me, he'll realize like, of course he wants to date me. And so we'd go through the motions. We'd be hanging out, like going out to drinks, going out to dinner, meeting each other's friends. But to them, it was like still casual because they set they stated, I want this to be casual. But to me, I'm like, oh, well, like we're doing all the things that people in relationships do. Like this guy's basically my boyfriend at this point. He just hasn't like made it official. And then to my surprise, a few months later, they'd be like, by the way, like, I just want to make sure you're still on the page, like the same page. Like this isn't going anywhere. And I'm like, what do you mean?
What do you mean? We just had dinner and a movie and great sex and popcorn and what? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So going back to the attachment style thing is, you were probably almost exclusively dating people who were anxiously attached.
Now that I'm aware of these theories, yeah. Oh my God. And it's a real eye opener. And as someone who is like a skeptic with everything, I would highly recommend everyone go take an attachment style quiz immediately because it will make you see clearly right away. It did for me. I'm still wrestling with what to do with myself. I went out the other night and again, I just seemed to like sort of fumble into situations, and I did, and it was great. So there's like a whole thing that I'm trying to figure out there. But yeah, COVID made it really easy to isolate myself already. So I was like, well, I'm already isolated, so this isn't, so I kind of just rolled with it through COVID. But now, I mean, we're not through it quite yet, but I'm vaccinated and I'm like just kind of getting back out there, and it's like, okay, we're gonna have to make a decision here. Are you gonna be like a fully functioning person, or are you gonna be off limits to everyone? Also too, what I've found personally is the more I take myself out of the game, the more the game comes looking for me. Like, who tries to pull me makes me more. It's weird. It's a weird factor.
Well, it's like what they say, like you'll find what you love or whatever you're looking for once you stop looking for it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing with anxious attachment and avoidant is that the more, just like you said, the more I would tell you like, hey, I'm not looking for anything, you would just be like, okay, yeah, but you'd be more invested the more I would say that, almost, because those two things are drawn to one another.
Well, because also if you're not looking for something serious, but you're still spending time with me, you're still going through the motions, taking me out to dinner, introducing me to your friends, like having sleepovers, having pillow talk, cuddling in the morning, like getting bagels when we wake up. Like, no, but you like
Yeah.
me. I don't care what you think you're looking for or not looking for. You like me. But the thing is, I mean, it's like I was at fault in every single one of those situations where I should have protected myself. After, especially after the first time, after the second time, after the third time where it continued to happen, like I wasn't saying, okay, this is a pattern and this is something that I can actually prevent from happening once I hear them say, hey, like anything about the word casual, anything about casual or not serious, that should have just been like a light bulb moment of like, okay, Alana, turn around and
Yeah.
walk away. But it wasn't. And it took a really long time of getting hurt and having to like build back up my confidence and convince myself that I was like deserving of a relationship to kind of finally say like, okay, I'm gonna not do this anymore.
Yeah, and that takes a long time to get to that place. And also, even when you do get to that place, it still fucking sucks, I'm sure. There's a point that I want to get your perspective on, and it's so old and cheesy and cliche, but they say there's always more fish in the sea. I mean, although our sea's polluted and everything's dying, there's still, like, I truly believe, and I always tell my friends who may be going through a breakup or for some reason they come to me for advice, which is good if you want a certain thing, bad if you want whatever. But I state that in the beginning, I can help you with this, but I probably shouldn't be helping you with this.
Well, I love that point. And before we get to your point you want to make, I just need to call out that everybody needs to be more intentional with who they go to for advice.
Yeah.
Like you have to figure out what friends you want what kind of advice from and what friend is going to kind of hold your hand and comfort you, or what friend is going to tell it like it is and not kind of like coddle you. And then you also need to find out like what friends should you not be going to for advice and actually like follow that. Because I've learned there are some friends like I cannot go to talk about anything related to dating. And I used to continuously go to them, and every time I would leave the conversation feeling awful. And so it's just something kind of you need to like kind of put into practice that we don't really do.
No, I think because all these things we're not doing, okay? So we're not communicating with the people that we are in situationships or relationships or whatever with. We're not communicating with them. We are not asking the correct friends. We're sort of going to the people who maybe make us feel better or will agree with us or whatever. That's all the same problem in my book, really. And I guess I would ask you, it all sort of becomes this larger communication problem. So we'll do this one, then I'll jump back to my other point. But how do you think, with all of your knowledge, with you doing this show this long, your time at Hinge, your personal experiences, how do you think we just at least take the first step to solving this massive communication problem?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, looking back at your previous relationships, situationships, 3-date things you had with people, looking back at them and figuring out like where did it go, not necessarily wrong, but not right. Like what could have happened differently. And I know I'm helping somebody through what's happening in their dating life right now. And her whole thing is like, she was always afraid to communicate her needs because in a very serious relationship that she was in, when she did do that, he would kind of shoot her down or make fun of her for it or really not be receptive to it. And she's like, well, maybe I was asking for too much. And it's like, no, you have needs. Like we all have needs. And so I think looking back and figuring out like, okay, I was afraid to do this, so I didn't. And then that built up, and that was ultimately like what didn't work for me and what made it not possible to work. Or, okay, I was asking this friend for advice the entire time and I was taking their advice, but their advice wasn't working for me. Well, maybe me and that friend are very different when it comes to dating, and I should not take her advice. that's another thing. Like, it's really looking back and kind of pinpointing, like, okay, what could I have done differently for it to not necessarily work out? Because who knows if it would have worked out, but for it to have been a better situation. And then saying, like, okay, in the future, how can I communicate my needs better? Or how can I let somebody know, like, hey, the way you said this made me feel like not that
Mhm.
great. Or like for me, one big thing was like, I'm a really big texter. And so if somebody's not texting me, it makes me think that they
Right.
don't like me or that they're over me or that they might be ghosting me. And so I realized that that was something that I struggled with. And there was this guy that I saw like a lot of potential with. And when we were on the dates, everything was great. And then in between the dates, I was a fucking disaster. And so I finally said to him, like on maybe our like third or fourth date, like, are you just like really bad with your phone or like, do you not like to text? Like, I'm just like so confused because when I see you, it's great. And then like we don't talk for an entire week straight. And I'm so confused and thinking the date's not going to happen. He's like, oh no, I've just been like super busy at work and I'm not really on my phone. But like, if it'll make you feel better for me to text you, I can totally do that. And I was like, whoa, okay. And then he did. And so like that was something where I learned from my past experiences that I needed somebody who was going to communicate with me in between dates. And then when I saw that something could work out with somebody, I said, hey, I need this thing. And he said, okay. And it ultimately didn't work
Right.
out. But had he not been receptive to it, that would have been a really big sign that, like, okay, this guy isn't for
Yeah.
me.
And you also learned, I think, more importantly, you learned that sometimes when you ask for something, you get it, but you have to ask
Yeah.
for it.
You have to ask for
Yeah.
it. That's literally the biggest life lesson I've gotten from my mom is if you don't ask, you
Right.
don't get. And like that has taken me through every like major milestone in
Yeah.
my life. And it really does relate to everything. And then another thing I think is really important is figuring out like kind of going back to the who do you ask for advice from? It's like whose relationships are you looking
Mhm.
up to? And maybe you shouldn't be asking for dating advice from your single friend who has screwed themselves in every single dating situation they've been in, or from your friend who just got dumped and their heart is broken and but they're usually the person you go to for dating advice. Like they might not have the clearest head right now. And so it's similar. It's like, are you asking for advice about dating and relationships from someone who's an epic failure in theirs or from someone who's like done it right and whose relationships you admire?
Yeah. And it's difficult because there's not you only see what you know, right? So if you have a set of friends around you, you only know their relationship. You only know their, and you only see what they tell you. You only see what's on Instagram
Mhm.
and whatever. You don't see what's really going on. It's not until they're quiet at your Sunday football thing that you're like, what's wrong? And then they, after the fourth beer, like, we have an issue with and that whole
Right.
thing happens. So, I mean, and relationships are fucking hard. I mean, just even like casual relationships are fucking hard. It's all built on difficulty, all of it. And
Yeah.
and that's why when my friends come to me for advice, I'm more of like the Machiavellian, oh, this is what you want, well, this is how you get it. And I will get you to there, right? But once you get there, you shouldn't be asking me for how to maintain it, whatever, because I'm going to have this sort of nihilistic view because my personal view is not, again, I had to take myself out of the, temporarily because I had to figure out what the hell why I'm so evil. No, I'm just kidding. But I have to figure out what's going on with me. So yeah, if you want my advice, I can get you where you need to go. But after that, it's on you, man. Like I'm telling you, you don't want my advice past then because I'm just going to tell you that, hey, this is going to be a short-term thing and da-da-da-da-da, and you don't want to hear that. And also, a lot of my friends come to me for advice. They're like, oh my God, you're so right. And then they don't use
Hmm.
it. They don't use the advice at all, which
Yeah.
is a thing.
That's a big thing is take hearing what to do and doing the opposite.
Oh God, yeah. I think, go ahead.
And no, I was just gonna say that goes back to like who are you taking your advice from and what kind of person are they? Because I realized my friends and I date completely differently and have had completely different past relationship experiences. Like I've been cheated on. And so that is going to impact the way I view all of my dating
Mhm.
situations and the behavior of my partner versus anyone who hasn't been cheated on. And so it's these things from our past that really influence the way we date. And so, like, if my friend, if let's say a friend wrote into a group chat with me and someone else, um, like, okay, I just got this text from him. Should I answer or should I wait? My friend is going to say, he waited 2 hours, you wait 4 hours. I'm going to say, no, don't fucking wait, just respond.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would probably side with your friend in that scenario, but also at the same time, it seems like I mean, and please speak to this if you can. Like post COVID, I'm more inclined to answer your way almost because
hmm
it just it's weird. It's like there is a change, there is a shift in dating and communication. Do you think that COVID and like all the wacky other things that are happening in our world, do you think that that's changed dating? Do you for the better, for the worse? What are your thoughts?
I think it has actually changed dating for the better. I think we all went through obviously an incredibly difficult time in our lives, but a period of like real loneliness and mm, like a desperate need for human connection, whatever form that was in. And I know that took on a lot of different like things happening where, for example, like you could have ended up just like texting with somebody for like 5 months. You knew you were never going to actually meet them, or like maybe you would meet them when COVID was over, but it was just that companionship that people
Right.
wanted. Or people realizing like, okay, this like little fun thing that I'm having, like I can't do this anymore because it's actually not safe and it's going to put people that I like at risk. It also, like, people couldn't necessarily go around like sleeping with multiple people or even like going on dates with multiple people at a time because again that would put other people at risk that they were dating. And so there was kind of this change in everyone's behavior where people wanted something more serious or finally realized like, okay, maybe I do want to settle down and not just hook up with people and actually find somebody because I don't want to be alone again. um and it also brought on people saying like, okay, you know what? I've dated like multiple people in the past for long periods of time. Maybe I need to actually just find one person and stick with it and ride it out and see if it goes well or not. And then go on to the next person if it doesn't. And so I think a lot of these things have actually stayed. Like even this past summer, everyone was like, oh my God, like hot vax summer, shot girl summer, or like waxed and vaxxed. But like it ended up not being
No.
like that. Like it wasn't just like a summer of like people hooking up and all that shit. Like people either it seems like kind of any other summer where people like either got into relationships or
Yeah.
didn't. And that was that. It wasn't this huge crazy sex fest that like people were expecting
Yeah.
it to be. And I think part of the reason is because people didn't actually want that. Like they wanted a real connection with someone.
Yeah, there seems to be two sort of views, right? There's that view and which is very prevalent. I see it everywhere. And then I feel like this last summer was too soon to be a hot vac summer. Like, big
Right.
like everybody partying, having a giant fuck fest. I feel like that's like I think that's next summer or, or so,
Here's hope. Here's
right.
hoping.
So that's the other side of it. I would say because it does seem though, however, that there is a place for both. There, and it also seems like people are taking chances with, I don't know, like meeting other people, like saying hello or
Mhm.
starting like there. I think people are more apt to say what they're thinking or take chances in introducing themselves or something. I don't know. I feel like there's something in the air out there that's different, kind of
Yeah.
like in this stage.
Well, also, I think part of the reason is like for so long we were just all we had was our computers and our phones. That was the only way we could actually
Right?
communicate with each other. And all we wanted was to be back in person, back at a bar, back at a restaurant, back at a party. And so now when we do have those opportunities to do that, like we're making the most of them. And I think that's a really great thing. And that's the right way to live. And I mean, in that, with just saying hi to people or being open to meeting people, I wish I could like shake some of my friends, like grab them and just shake them and be like, what do you
Yeah.
have to lose? If you see somebody at a bar, at a party, at a grocery store, like anywhere that's just not creepy, if you see somebody that intrigues you and that like you find attractive and you're curious about them, you have absolutely nothing to lose by going up to them and just saying hi. Or like, oh, like, what are you drinking? Or have you been here before? Like,
Yeah.
what's good on the menu? Or, oh, who do you know at this party? Because look, it's either going to go well or nothing's going to happen. And you're right back where you were standing there wishing
Right.
you would say something.
Yeah, someone actually did that to me over the weekend, and I thought it was like the coolest thing ever. And we talked for, I don't know, like an hour, hour and a half or something. And then right at the end where we should have exchanged each other's numbers, it's like someone asked a question and then it got all like fucked up and we both went our separate ways. And now I'm like, damn, okay. And it has me, someone who wouldn't normally, would be like, oh, well, now I'm like, huh, do I find her on social media? Is that creepy? I don't, So, but it's it's something that I can tell that it's happening. I can tell that people are taking those chances. I just hope that it gets louder. I hope that it gets more. I hope that it gets, insane, because I think you're right. People were kind of like stuck in the house and wanting, and here it is. It's not. Yeah,
People were bored in the house and in
of
the house
course.
bored.
Yeah. So some of the other things that come up on your podcast that I think play right into this, and I see it, and I'm going to put it in my own words, but the idea that heartbreak or pain is a normal thing, and like bad things happen, it's fucking normal, and to stop running away from it and kind of embrace it versus like, oh God, I'm scared. Can you like expand on that and talk about like, because for me that's the one. Just in general, like pain is good, you know what I mean, like in a way like
Yeah.
you kind of have to, if you can learn, let me put it another way, if you can learn to embrace pain and how uncomfortable it is, there's nothing that you can't accomplish.
Yeah, 100%. I love those specific points that you kind of flagged. Yeah, and like bad things happen to good people. I want to start with that because bad things happen to everyone. Bad things happen to good people, to bad people, to normal
Good, bad
people, to
yeah.
celebrities, to our parents, to good, bad. Like bad things happen to everyone. There is not a single human being on this earth that is immune to something bad happening to them. And whether it's something bad happening to somebody they love, like losing somebody, or someone they love, like ended up in jail, like literally whatever it is, it's going to affect you and it's going to change who you are and how you see the world and how you interact with others. And people are so afraid to say to somebody else, like, hey, I'm a little bit broken because of this thing. And like, we are all broken because of certain things. Like I said, like I got cheated on, and I was in like multiple toxic relationships that like literally shattered me to pieces. And I thought I was never going to be okay again. But I learned from them. And that is what led me to like doing what I do now and helping other people with their dating lives. And that's like a beautiful thing. And we've all, like every single person in this world will get their heart broken. And we don't like to admit like, hey, I have been at rock bottom, or I have felt these feelings or thought these things, and we're afraid to tell people, but in actually communicating those things to people, that's what ends up connecting us, and that's what ends up making us form like relationships and bonds with people. And if we all said like, well, this thing happened to me, so I'm not lovable, or like I'm not dateable, then nobody would be dateable, because we've all had things happen to us. And it's really hard because everyone's things are different. And so we might not always know how to communicate about the thing that the person is trying to tell us. And that's why I kind of started the Unfiltered episodes, where I could bring people on to talk about their whatever mental health struggle they are facing, or being like raped in the past, or having to get an abortion, or whatever it is, because you never know who you are going to be sitting across a table from on a first date, or a third date, or a 10th date, and what they're going to tell you. And so realizing that, okay, this thing happened to them, but it doesn't define them. What defines them is kind of what they did with it and how they learned from it and how they grew from it. And the fact that they're sitting here telling me now, like, what can I say to them to let them know that I see them and I hear them and I respect them? Because we never expect to be on a date and somebody tell us that they've been like
Right.
institutionalized for their mental health or that they have an STI. But that's not something that like that like regardless of what it is, it might not be something that happened to us, but it's something that like we also have something that happened to us that now in hearing them open up, like we feel more comfortable opening up too. Anywho, bad things happen to everyone.
Yeah, but no, I mean it's extremely important. And it's one of those things where most people do run from it. Most people try and
Yeah.
like bolt out of that idea, out of that. They don't want to bring it up. They don't want to, even internally, they're like that makes me, you know, damaged or whatever the case may
Yeah.
be. And that's kind of like your flaws and your bad experiences are a lot like that's the framework. That's your framework. That's what kind of makes you you. And so I that's why I wanted to ask you that question, because I feel like you have a lot to say about it, but from a place of actual like understanding and experience, and you've been able to like have so many conversations with people that are the same way. So if people are listening to this, look, like display your flaws, man. Like open up and if you can, like at least to yourself. If like I understand going to another person and saying, "Hey, all these horrible things like off the bat might yeah,
Right. Like don't do that
might
on the
not be a
first
great
date.
idea." But I do feel if they can come to terms with it on their own, you know, internally, then they're entering whatever situation hella powerful. It's just that's a secret power up we just unlocked, is own your pain instead of your pain making,
Yeah.
you know, you work for it. Make your pain work for you. Um,
Yeah, because also people often feel held back by it. They're like, oh, well, nobody's going to love me because of this thing. So, like, I may as well not even go on dates. But you might end up on a date with somebody who's been through the same exact thing or something way worse. And the thing is, with like you said, it's like unlocking each other. Like, you can't get into a successful relationship with somebody if you are not open about this thing because like we said, like it shapes you and it defines you and or not it doesn't define you, but how you kind of reacted
yeah,
to it kind of does. And it's just there you're doing yourself a disservice by
yeah,
holding back.
and also that stuff's gonna come flooding out at some point anyway. So it's better to kind of like get it on the table relatively soon. Again, don't walk into your first date and unless you want to, then do
Yeah.
it, you know? Um
Yeah.
okay, one of the things that I think is important coming from you and having, you know, mountains of experience and on the personal and from the podcast, how can someone cut down on bullshit? How can someone cut down on time if they're looking for an ideal partner? And let me just say, I'm not saying like, hey, get somebody married in a month, but how can someone
Right.
thin the herd? What are some tips or some things you could give them to really make just approaching dating totally different than what they think it is?
Yeah. So, first things first, like we kind of just talked about, if you are somebody like me who realizes that every casual quote unquote situation you've entered in has gotten you hurt, then know that that is a part of you and it's okay. But the second you hear casual from somebody, say, unfortunately, like we're looking for different things, but I really enjoyed our time getting to know each other, and I hope you find what you're looking for. Boom, done, move on. So that's number one is figuring out what actually doesn't work for you and not wasting your time on it anymore. You're not going to change anyone. You should not have to go into a situation wanting to change someone. You also can't fix people. So that's one rule of thumb is don't try and find a
Yeah.
project and somebody who's like totally not in a place to form a relationship. Um, sometimes it feels really good to fix people, but that's not what you're here for. Another thing is really figuring out like, what do you want in a relationship? Like, I know we always talk about like red flags or deal breakers, but it's like, what is actually a red flag for you and what is actually a deal breaker for you? And I hear people who say like, oh, like I don't want kids, but I'll date people and like wait until like the 20th date to find out whether or not they want kids. Like, no, you are literally wasting everyone's time. You're wasting your time, you're wasting their time, and you're wasting the time of all of your friends, family members, and coworkers that the two of you are talking about this situationship to. So do everybody, including yourself, a favor and find that thing out on one of the first few dates. And it could be something as simple as bringing up like how, like talking about your childhood and being like, yeah, like I loved being raised in a place like this. Like, where do you plan to settle down? And if they say like, oh, like I'd love to raise my kids in XYZ place, you can say like, oh, like that I'm actually not, you don't even have to say that like, right there, then there, that you're not looking to raise kids, you know, but you're hearing from them that they are. And so whether it's something like that or something about your religion and not wanting to end up with somebody like, okay, so I'm from a predominantly Jewish area, and I have a lot of friends who only want to end up with somebody who is Jewish, but they'll date any type of person. They'll date somebody who's Catholic, somebody who's Christian, somebody who is atheist, whatever, because they're like, oh, well, like I'm young, like I still have time, like I can still like have fun with people, but I'm just not going to let it be serious with any of them. It's like, well, what if you end up falling for one of them? You never know. And then you're going to get into a situation where you're losing sleep at night because you don't know what to do, because you don't know if you can let yourself be with this person. You love them, but you don't want to break up with them, but you have to. And I have probably 20 friends in that situation now. So don't date people who are of a different religion than you. If religion is something that is important to you, like figure out what it is that is important to you in a long-term, like lifelong relationship, and don't bend on that, you know? No one's forcing you into relationships you don't want to be in, hopefully.
No, only you are doing that to yourself. Yeah, absolutely. Alana Dunn, thank you so much for helping us today, for being here, for advising, for putting everything into such a wonderful context. I hope that I can get you back on the show and we could continue the conversation. But thank you so much.
Thank you. This was great. I'm really excited to be here, and I appreciate you having me and everyone listening.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon. Big thanks to Alana Dunn. She's so awesome, man. She's just so awesome. Listen, if you are enjoying these episodes, there's a couple different ways you can show it if you want to. If you're listening on platforms like Apple, Spotify, Amazon, whatever, you can subscribe to the show. You can become a subscriber. It's absolutely free. You just have to click subscribe. You could leave a review if you're digging it. That would be awesome. That would be really, really awesome. If you're watching on YouTube, hey, how you doing? You can subscribe on YouTube as well. You can like the video. You can leave a comment. You guys can always DM me on Instagram. You can always DM me on Twitter. I will DM you back and we'll chat. I cannot wait to see you guys in the next episode.
Thanks for listening. The party continues next week. Click subscribe and let's make this a regular thing. Follow the show on Instagram and Twitter @SexPartyFM. Follow Dustin @DustinRibka.